Hope you're all doing well. I wanted to share a fun game that I played against Hikaru today in his sub queue. This was an odds game where I started out with 4 bishops with the black pieces, and Hikaru, as you can see, started out with the 4 knights. Now, obviously, in a 3-minute odds game, craziness is going to happen, but there were some instructive moments and a lot of fun moments, so I figured I would share it with you. So things got off with just both of us taking control of the center, and Hikaru immediately attacks my bishop. Bishop comes back, and knight d3, c6, knight e2. Now, Hikaru's just trying to get developed here. He's trying to make quick moves early on, but already a pretty instructive move here from the black pieces. And hilariously enough, as this is going to sound, the move that I'm about to show you is the engine's preference. Okay, so keep this kind of idea in mind. When you've got knights standing on g3, g6, b3, and b6, these squares can sometimes be undermined with a flank pawn. And for that reason, I played h5, and this already puts this knight in a bit of a precarious position. Because if Hikaru allows me to play h4, he's just going to have to return his knight here. This is not going to be pretty at all. So Hikaru plays h4 himself. But when you've got a bishop versus a knight in a kind of dynamic like this one, that h4 pawn is very tough to guard, and that's going to become relevant later. So again, a good way to fight against knights sometimes on the edge of the board, if you're not castled that way, for example, is to use this kind of flank pawn maneuver. So here, I played a move which in hindsight was a little bit silly, but I had a plan behind it. I thought that after takes, Hikaru would play queen d3, and that would allow me to develop another bishop here with tempo, but Hikaru just recaptured with the pawn, which actually does make a lot of sense. What I should have played here, by the way, was just to bring out the bishop on its own and put pressure along the diagonal. And, you know, obviously that would have given me some very, very good light squared control on e4, some pressure on d3, and so on and so forth. Especially once I take this knight, b2 will be softened up as well. So don't trade too quickly is kind of the lesson here. But I took and played queen b6, queen d2, and g6. So of course this supports the pawn and potentially, you know, gets my bishop out in the future. Knight c3, and here again another move. Well, you're never going to have 3 bishops in a game, probably, but I had 2. And so what do you do when you have a lot of, you know, you got a lot of bishop firepower? You try to open up the center of the board. So takes, Hikaru wins the tempo. And again, I shouldn't have rushed here, but I wanted to simplify the position just a little bit so it would be a bit easier to play. And I took on g3 because I figured his knight on g3 isn't really that strong, and my pawn structure is doing quite well. But of course, here, there is no need to rush. I can back up, and really my problem is my light squared bishop. I'm not going to win this game with 2 dark squared bishops. I need to be dominant on, you know, on both colors. So takes, bishop d6, and obviously the idea was to take, but then Hikaru castled. And this kind of surprised me. I thought he was going to have to make some sort of move covering this, but here we see traditional positional value diminished. Okay, and so, you know, while I'm breaking his structure and obviously softening up the e4 a little bit in the center, and e3 could be weak in the future, the real problem is I'm not really developed, and he just opened up his line directly toward my king with his rook. So taking on g3, not, you know, not the best thing, even though if you go elementary level of analysis, you go double pawns are good, and I'm breaking up his structure, but not the best move. But I also didn't play the best move here. I saw an idea which seemed very straightforward, but it's got a bit of a drawback. Undeveloping my queen and going after, as I said a couple minutes ago, that weak pawn on h4. Now, at first glance, it looks like I'm just winning it, okay? It looks like I'm picking up the pawn, that I'm going to have pressure, I'm going to castle my king, it's going to be good. Now, I want you, if you're watching right at this moment, first of all, like the video and subscribe if you haven't, love you. But if you're watching right now, pause. Find the best move for white. If you want to, I can flip the board so it would be a little bit easier for you. What's the best move in this position for white? And I'm going to tell you the answer right now. The best move in this position is e4. You're not going to be able to guard this pawn anyway. And so the reason you play e4 is a couple of things. So first of all, white is much more developed than black. Castled, rooks connected, queen out, knights out. Black is at least 2 moves away from castling. And the other way you find e4 is, well, the king's right here. That's really the biggest thing. And in general, that kind of ties to point number 1, is that I'm not developed. I'm a few moves away from castling, but you need to attack a king that's in the center of the board, and you need to try to make progress with your pieces, okay? These knights can't go forward without a pawn trade, right? They have no way to come forward. So that's why white should play e4 here, and then after something like pawn takes e4, knight e4 is coming, rook e1 is coming, and I'm not going to be able to take this pawn. Actually, it's a tactical defense of this pawn. Hikaru makes a mistake, plays f4. I mean, he's just human. And I take on h4, he plays queen f2, I long castle, and now another instructive moment. Opposite side castling, white is down a pawn, but black is also down about a minute. I think at this point I had about 90 seconds, he had 230, so he's up on time. Very practical decision here from Hikaru in a position, rather than just sit tight and defend and let me expand my pieces. He starts opening the lines on the queen side. Now, of course, this is a free pawn, but the drawback is that my bishop kind of walks away from this diagonal. He might back up his knight or just transfer both rooks and all of a sudden have some very annoying pressure on my queen side. Now, when you plug in that position to the engine, it actually says that you should take on b4 and then suck it up. Absorb the pressure, you'll be fine. That's not always so easy to do, especially when you play someone higher rated, but instructive moment, right? Sometimes our opponents are bluffing, and if you don't see a follow-up, you should go for it. I decided, all right, I'm going to disregard that, and I'm going to go for my own play. Obviously, the point here is that if you take bishop g3 and it's over, so Hikaru plays b5. Now, again, I have a very aggressive playing style, for better or for worse, so I swapped the pawns off here. And here, I obviously didn't want to take. That allows the knight to come. That also opens the c-file. The queen comes in. But I played a move here which, in hindsight, made the game a little bit too crazy, and ultimately, you know, I burned my hand on the stove. But it's kind of an instructive moment for you anyway. I just counterattacked on the other side of the board. I allowed him to take on c6, and here, rather than simply recapturing, which would have been the best move, I decided to go all in on the g-file and on that side of the board. And when he took my second pawn on b7 with check, I used this pawn as an umbrella pawn. Robert Hess, shout out to him. He coins this term in one of his commentaries that I saw. This is when an attacking pawn does not get captured by the defending side, and instead you hide behind it. And because Hikaru has knights here, it's not easy for him to get to the only two squares where he can put me in more danger. So I hide behind the pawn, and everything is okay. Knight e2, queen g4, he offers a queen trade. When you're under pressure, it's good to trade the queens. That's why he's doing that. I backed up, and he plays rook f2, and I decided, well, I've got to do something here. It's very difficult for me to mobilize, so I'm playing h4, giving another pawn in the process, and h3. Now, this looks like, he cannot take like this, but if he takes like this, the whole idea of kicking the queen away is to get my bishop to e4. That is the reason that I did this, because then his queen is passive and my bishop dominates the center of the board. So I sacrificed the pawn for activity. At this very moment, I would have been down 3 pawns, but with pretty substantial pressure on his king. Obviously, the position is still unclear. So Hikaru disregards that and plays rook c1. Now here, I should have kept it simple, but with time dwindling, trying to create chaos where there was none, I played queen h6, which I thought was logical because I defend this now from queen takes. The rook is open, but I don't have a threat, frankly. And Hikaru kind of fell for my bluff and played knight g3. Still, obviously, a perfectly good move, but I don't have a threat. And I mean, if he just goes g3, I'm toast. You know, there's h2, but he just, he plays something like king h1, and I'm not going to be getting in. So he played knight g3, and I got very happy. I was like, oh, queen h4, I'm winning. Then the knight's under attack. I've got something. So another instructive moment for you all, danger levels. I'm attacking his knight. I'm threatening to take his knight. Well, here Hikaru should just use his umbrella pawn and the rook, and there's actually a very simple, a win here. Just disregard this, and if I take, then this is mate. It's just mate, because if I take, he makes a new queen, and if I play queen takes g3, I think this is still winning with an absolutely beautiful combination. Takes here, and you use the second rook and deliver a stunning ladder checkmate. Now, neither one of us saw that. That's a ridiculous sacrifice to see in a blitz game, an odds game, and given the circumstances, but just a hilarious example of white going from total defense to just transferring and opening these lines. And this ties all the way back to Hikaru's move b4, which he played on move 16. When he opened those lines, there was some foresight, into the future of what this might look like. Now, he didn't see queen c3, instead opting for this trade, but this way my king escapes the checks. And in a crazy turn of events, he's got no follow-up check, all right? So here I was getting confident again. Hikaru actually immediately made a mistake with rook f3, but I had 30 seconds on the clock, and, well, I went for a sacrifice. I gave him my bishop, and I thought, oh, I'm opening his king! And then I got this far and was like, uh-oh. And the game ended very unsuccessfully with me pushing, and if he takes me, he gets mated. But, he just went straight for the kill, and I just walked into mate. I just didn't see that. I thought if rook here, I would at least maybe escape for a moment, but even that's, no. All hope is lost once the check comes in. Yeah, the sacrifice in time trouble was not good. Actually, I should have punished this move and taken on g2 with a very nice idea to take the knight and then get my queen into h1, at which point I've got a very nasty attack coming, pushing through the g-pawn. Actually, I think Engine was like screaming here for this move, but what to do, right? I mean, it was a very, very tough, complex game. I mean, my king was out in the open, only shielded by the bishop and my pieces from a distance. But very exciting game, and well, when in the right hands, it seems as though 4 knights do defeat 4 bishops. But perhaps if we switch the pieces, you know, Hikaru would have also beaten me with the 4 bishop army as well.